Hey there, what I see is people letting their businesses run their lives versus them leading their business to love their life. I see this in corporate jobs, and I see where we step into expectations that other people have of us that do not honor us and allow us to lead our own life. Welcome to this episode, and I'm glad you're here to listen.
From the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am so excited today to have my good friend Tammy Olson on. Tammy, you're in Wisconsin, right? If I recall.
Very close, Minnesota.
Minnesota, that's right. I knew I was going to mess that up. I shouldn't have even gone there, but so she is in Minnesota, and I am super excited because Tammy and I met through a good friend and mentor to both of us, Erin Marcus, who does Conquer Your Business, a little shout out for her. And we both signed up for a program, and we met each other. We stayed in an Airbnb together and really got to know each other over that weekend. And I'm so thankful for that. And Tammy has this really cool business that helps people like me and you that you're listening to get in shape. And I'm going to tee that up a little bit. And it's not about being a personal trainer, but I'm going to let you, Tammy, introduce yourself professionally, because I feel like we can do a much better job of doing that than someone else trying to do it for us. So tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here, Debbie. Thank you for the invitation. I help, as you said, small business owners create order in their business. And we do that through creating a foundation that then allows them to scale and grow with a lot less stress. I would like to say often we get to that point where we've done all the things we can on our own, and we need somebody to help us because we're scrappy bootstrappers, and eventually we're going to need some extra help. My background prior to having my business is I worked in corporate for a really long time. Just going to say that, a lot of corporate experience. And what I was finding, in particularly in my last roles, as I was having conversations with people in my social network that were small business owners, some of the questions that they had or the challenges they were trying to solve, I would, respond back with, well, have you thought about this? Or, from my experience, my corporate experience, have you considered that? And eventually enough people started telling me, geez, that was really helpful. Gosh, maybe you should do this as a business. Can I hire you? I went, yes, you can. And took my corporate business acumen on the road, because I really do love working with small business owners. You're very close to the point of impact. And I love really being able to make a difference for someone who may have been struggling for, some period of time.
Yeah, Tammy, that's so awesome. We have a little bit of parallel there. I've talked about this before, where I started in corporate and kind of the same thing. Somebody said, hey, can you help me with this business plan? And then, hey, can you help me get my business ready to sell? And I'm like, oh, I can make a living doing this, right? So I know this is going to drop in November. Those of you that are listening, it's November, almost Thanksgiving. And we are taping this, though, at the end of June. And you're going through a lot of changes right now. So tell us the name of your business, because I know you introduced what you do, but now tell us a little bit about the name of your business and what changes you're going through right now. How's that pushing your growth edge?
My growth edge. My growth edge is so far in my rearview mirror. I am beyond the growth edge. So the company name is Tammy Olson Consulting. When I first started branching out from corporate, that felt really scary to come out with my name. It's just my name. When it's attached to you, it feels sort of like whatever. So I had another name, and it actually served me for a while. And then it became kind of a little bit of an albatross, because I was unexplaining or re-explaining what it is that I actually do and how I show up. And so I took what people told me initially as that I should just use my name, and I went, okay, I guess these people know something. So that whole branding effort, though, around there's a look and feel, and there's messaging, and how we're going to talk about it. So Tammy Olson Consulting, it is because you're working with me. I'm it. I'm your, I might be your lobster. I'm your gal, and I'm going to work with someone. There was no point in putting up kind of this bigger business name. It didn't serve me.
Yeah. And Tammy, I love that. And part of what I love about this, and I want everybody listening to really hear this, that it took help from someone to help you with your branding and your messaging, because that's not your lane of genius. And your lane of genius is helping people I'm going to make up a word here, I think. Systematize, right?
It's a word.
I don't,
Yeah.
I haven't had enough coffee yet today. Systematize their businesses so it frees them up to make more money, have more time, have more control over their lives. So when you think about that, I'm putting a plug in there, right, for Tammy, because you need to call Tammy Olson Consulting, and streamline that. So when you're working with people, what have you found, like for small business owners like myself and those listening, what are some of the top, say, 3 things that you run into when you're working with entrepreneurs that seems to kind of slow them down or get in the way of them making more money and having more time and more control?
Oh, yes, top 3. Number
Yeah.
1, and I can tell you that as I was starting my business, I was just a subject, victim of this as everyone else, was bright, shiny syndrome. There are a bazillion tools, platforms, all the
Yeah.
things. You talk to people, you read, you're on social, everyone's talking about the thing, and you think you have to have the thing. And again, I fell subject to that myself, so I know how easy it is. So that's it can be challenge number 1, is that you're looking for all the bright shiny objects to solve your problems. The second thing that I think trips people up is a little bit of fear, because they, clients or prospects will say, well, I don't need systems. It seems like a really big thing. I'm just me. And a system isn't, a system is just how we get through our day. It's how we do things.
Yeah.
So
It's just the process, right? Yeah.
yeah, you kind of have to peel that back. I'm like, I'm not talking like IT infrastructure here. I'm just talking about systems. It could be that, probably not. And the third thing that I think I hear people say, or that might slow them down a little bit, is, like I mentioned, if you're an entrepreneur, we're scrappy, we are self-starters, we want to do all the things, and that's great in the beginning, but it almost becomes a challenge then when you start to think about, but I think someone else could help me, because it feels like you're giving up a part of your business, and this is very personal for us, and there's a little bit of trepidation maybe about letting someone peek behind the curtain, or kind of see that I'm a shit show. I said it.
No, you're good. You're good.
And it's okay. Like, I just want to meet people where they are, wherever that is, and we can go from there. So those are the things that surface to me.
So let me say this back to you. So what I was hearing was stay clear and focused.
Yeah.
No squirrel,
No
right?
squirrel.
Like if I could turn these around. The third one, my mind is a little blank here, but the third one is around feeling like it's hard, it's overwhelming to systematize, when in fact it's just putting a process together to give you more time, money, and control.
Yeah.
Right. And what was the second one? Why am I blanking?
Now you got me blanking. So we have, I'm scrappy. I don't know that I have a system. Oh my God, Debbie, we're gonna have to go back and replay.
I know, right? We'll have to listen to it again. Anyway, I'm hearing you say these 3 things tend to be things then that people see as challenges, see as those big rocks in front of them. And when they're squirreling out,
Yep.
and getting focused on all the shiny objects, other than telling them to stop it, what do you do? Because I'm just as guilty of that too, right? Like, oh, I got to have the next thing.
So here were the 3. They were squirreling. They were, I don't have a system, like that feels too big. And the third one was really, it's your baby and you're kind of afraid to get help from someone. That's okay.
Yeah.
You stumped me too. I'm like, I have no idea what I just said. So what are the things that can, or how do they stop? How do we stop the?
Yeah, like how do you stop the squirreling? How do you stop the, I need the next thing? Yeah,
well, I think acknowledging that probably comes from a place of, there's a little bit of, I'm not gonna lie, there's a little lack mindset to that. You don't have what it takes. I'm feeling like I can't do this, so I'm gonna go look for every other thing. And you just have to come back to center, because there are things that you do know. You have a business. There's a reason why you're doing the work you're doing. And none of those platforms, tools, shiny things that you think you need are going to solve the problem for you until you know, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I want to do it. This is what works for me. You just have to come back to center, because nothing else can work, can support you until I know, or you know, what we're trying to support. And that's
Yeah,
a
it
scary
almost-
place. So that's where there's often other resources in play.
Right.
People like
Well,
you.
and it sounds like too, a little bit, Tammy, I call this the shell game. I don't know how many of you remember back in the day.
Mhm.
I'm aging myself, where like you would have these things at the circus or whatever, where they would have these 3 shells and they'd put a ball or something underneath it, and then they'd move them around and try to get you to remember, or cups or whatever, where the ball was at, which shell is the ball under. And I know I find I do this, and I have to be conscious of this, where I can play the shell game with myself and think, oh, I've got to have this or I've got to have that. And I'm doing all these things when in fact I'm creating more chaos versus, you say, call it grounding, like getting really centered and remain focused on what your goal is, what your main, like where you're heading. Otherwise we take all these side roads and end up in, the middle of BFE, right? Yeah. Which is appropriate for business too, right? We end up going, what is all this stuff that I'm doing? I'm hustling and nothing is happening. Well, it's because we're churning the shells and we're not just staying focused on where we're heading and doing the actions, then is what I'm hearing you say, that leads into making sure you have systems. So having those actions that then help you stay focused and help you stay in your lane of genius. Because that's, I found, I was a CFO for a business. I know how to work QuickBooks. I know how to reconcile on those pieces of software. I don't like to do it, which why I was in that role, I'm not sure anyway. But, like it was a challenge at first to get to know it, but I would much rather pay someone else to do that work.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so that's a way then I can look at, okay, that's a system in a way, right? Because I'm hiring someone to go do that system. But then what I'm also hearing without you saying it is thinking about, like for me, when I have clients come, there's an onboarding process that happens and there are steps that we take. And so what I'm also hearing from other conversations we've had is that you help people identify where in their business are there gaps.
Oh, yes. Thank you for saying it that cleanly. Yes. Where
And
the
are
gaps?
those gaps people orientated or are they systems? And 9 times out of 10, the reason someone's not doing a job is because the system's broken.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
people don't come to work to do a bad job, right?
They do not. Mm-mm.
And that goes for us too, right? Like
Yes.
we can come in and we have all these great intentions to do X, Y, and Z, and then we don't. And we get bogged down. I mean, I'm going to use a perfect example of myself, Tammy. I went from signing 1 or 2 clients a month to signing 8
Yeah.
in 1 month. And I'm like, oh my goodness, doing 1 or 2 a month, I can do it all. Which we get into that case with ourselves too, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I need Sarah, my guru community builder person, to come out, and I need for her to help me create more of a system. I've got a system, but I'm doing all of the work in the system. So part of, I think what I'm hearing you say is you help them identify then what's the start to finish of something. And it doesn't even have to be the finish, because sometimes it's ongoing. And then who does that work?
Yes. And actually client onboarding is one of my favorite places to start, because it's where entrepreneurs flip the, like I'm doing okay. And then all of a sudden something happens. I'm super successful. The floodgates have opened. We're happy. And all of a sudden we realize that's the first roadblock, is how quickly can I get that client onboarded in the system? We know they're super excited. They just said yes. I don't want there to be hiccups in the process. So
Right.
Onboarding is literally one of the first places that I hear clients struggle when they experience that explosive growth.
And Tammy, who do you work with? I mean, I know it's entrepreneurs. Does it matter what industry they're in, or do you have kind of a niche industry? Because, I know sometimes systems carry over to regardless of industry, but then within industry, there's sometimes some niche systems that can come into play too.
There definitely are. So I'm working with service-based business owners.
Okay.
I have done a fair amount of work with construction, remodeling, trades, landscaping. The reason I think that those surface are oftentimes it's, one person, it's maybe a kid with a lawnmower who started out in college or whatever, and 15 years later, He has a real landscaping business with crews and payroll and all the things, but he's still treating it like he's a kid with a lawnmower, right? So that is a very typical arc. And so I have worked with a number of companies in, trades organizations, but what they do have in common is they're all small, like under 12 employees, under 10 employees. So that's a great place. I have also done a fair amount of work with other service providers, insurance agents, community managers, someone who actually is putting up like a podcasting business. So there are a number of other bookkeepers, fractional CFOs, though anyone who's doing that type of service-based work. And to the extent that platforms are customized, like particularly in construction remodeling and landscaping, the tools accomplish much the same thing in terms of customer management, proposals, the contracting process. That's all great, it's in the tool. But it doesn't change the fact that all of those steps are required in any business. So there's a great deal more in common with all service businesses than not.
Yeah. So it's transferable. So when you think about your journey too, because I'm sure you went through some of this, like when you think about your journey, what lights you up about helping small business owners?
What lights me up the most? So we get real business done. We're going to fix something. We're going to, make a business more efficient. But the thing that really lights me up is to actually have the conversations with the business owners. For example, I had an insurance agent. She had a small agency. She was looking to buy a new agency. She didn't have any sort of agency management platform. And so she was doing a lot of administrative work. So we found the right platform for her, did requirements getting, did the sales, put a platform in place. I'm like, okay, now let's talk about what you're going to do with all this time. And that's, Debbie, when we started to uncover for her that she would rather be busy doing the administrative. Oh, I'm so busy. I can't go out and prospect. I can't go network. I can't show up in my community. And she was in that kind of she wasn't a very small town. So who has never been to a small town parade that didn't see the insurance agent, with a float, pulling a wagon, whatever.
Yeah.
She wanted none of that. And so she'd been using this I'm too busy in my business excuse. So those are the things that are super fun. And then we have to, and fortunately she engaged me to stay with her a little bit longer to get her over the hump of, well, what are the things I could do?
Right.
And to be an accountability partner to actually get out and meet real people. That's how
Yeah,
you're gonna grow your
perfect.
business.
Yeah. And then you send him to me and I'll
Yes.
help him learn sales.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And how to network and do all that stuff. Anyway, so helping people see where they are where they're making it harder for themselves is what I'm hearing you say, right? Like when you're able to step into that and help people see that and then give them all this time back, because we think systems now at the very beginning, I'm not going to lie, right? When you first create a system, it takes time to create the system and it takes time sometimes to get it laid out. But then the return on that is so huge.
Oh yeah.
To your point, then she's like, well, I don't know what to do with my time. And then you're like, oh, let's go be in the parade. Right. And then it's like, oh yeah, now I need to do a little more digging, because what I find, like when you were saying the three things at the beginning and I mentioned to you growth edge, you're like, oh yeah, the growth edge is in my back mirror. Well, guess what? Your growth edge continues to happen. It just is at a different level.
I'm so far past it. Like I'm always on my green growing edge. Like,
I
didn't mean I'm done growing.
Yeah.
No, like I am always standing at the precipice. I'm always looking over. And fortunately, I have found that I'm not uncomfortable with that. Like I know that people really struggle. They want to know all the things. And I have in the last few years through this journey, I have gotten very, I've gotten more comfortable. I won't say very comfortable, more comfortable. And I actually embrace it. Like that's kind of it's kind of a leading indicator for me. It's like, oh, this feels whatever. You have the feelings and it's nerve wracking. And that's when I know that I'm on the right track. Like when I'm actually feeling those, I'm not sure what this is. This feels super scary. I'm like, keep going. That's where keep being scared. Yeah.
So it sounds like though that where I was going with that is that you're helping business owners, I call it surfing the edge of chaos, right? Like you're helping them surf on that edge of growth.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And teaching them how to surf so that they can stay on their surfboard versus crash into the ocean.
Yeah, I get feedback. That's an awesome description. I get feedback a number of years ago from someone I really respected. It's kind of my idol mentor. And she shared with me, she said, the best thing about it, the reason your clients love you, this was back in corporate, the reason your accounts are doing well is because you really create order out of their chaos. I literally wrote it down. Like I had someone tell me, and then that has surfaced for me ever since that one person said it to me. I've had other people explain, oh, you make, complex things simple. I didn't know that about myself. It's one of those things with our strengths. Like we don't know what they are because they're just who we are. And I am so grateful that someone, mirrored that to me because I'm like, really? Oh, awesome. And then I hear it and I get the feedback. I'm like, you're right. I'm very linear. I'm looking at my whiteboard. I have, columns and rows, and this is where things go, and that makes me happy. And so I love when I can help clients who can't do them for themselves. And honestly, on any given day, I can't do it for myself or my business either. We need outside perspective. We need it badly.
I always say, I am a business coach and a leadership coach, but yet I have my own coach and mentors too, right? Like, because we're too close to it and we can't see it. So Tammy, before we kind of wrap up, I want to ask you, can you give the listeners and myself, like, what are 2 hacks? What are 2 like pieces of advice that, if a person hears it and steps into this advice, that it will propel them or quantum leap them faster than if they just continue down the path? What would be like 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would give the listeners when it comes to creating systems, other than to call you and hire you?
No, I think 2 pieces of advice, and one of them is something that you've said, but it's 100% true in that don't make yourself wrong. So when business owners finally do reach out to me, there's a lot of excuses. Well, I just did this, or I just did that, or I know that this isn't perfect, and there's a lot of excuses, and that's where the don't make yourself wrong, and I'll just meet you where you are. Like, you did this for a reason. It made sense at the time. It serves you no longer. Great. Let's fix it. So I think a little less self-shaming is an excellent place to start. And then I would say, secondary to that, if you bring on a new, particularly as it relates to technology, be sure that you're not expecting the technology to solve a process challenge for you. By that, I mean, you need to know what your process is, what your ideal process would be. Because if we think that we're gonna buy Pipedrive, and now my sales funneling is gonna be amazing, everything's gonna be great. Well, if you didn't know how you wanted it to operate in the first place, just having the tool does nothing for you. So make sure that you know what you want the process to be first before you start tacking on technology.
Yeah, Tammy, I want to riff on this for just a second, because I can see this as really critical, because like there's so many different pieces of software, there's so many different tools that are out there. And I think this is such a critical point, that as a business owner, think about the process start to finish, how you want to set it up, because I've seen other people, I've done it, where then I'm piecemealing things together, right? Because I didn't think about how I wanted this to play out into, and using the word system, if that freaks you out, but it's a process, how I wanted the process to go, and then create and buy the pieces that support that. And then you end up with this hairball, because like I have Kajabi for this, and then I have Acuity that plugs into that calendar, and I use something else for a podcast, and now Kajabi came out with a podcast platform, but how do I integrate it in? And then it just becomes this thing that we can get stuck in, versus allowing it to quantum leap us into where we want to go. And we can get caught up in that piece. So I think that's a really critical piece. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I'm going to riff too. It's going to iterate. So we also have to recognize that our business will change, or these platforms will add new functionality that may change how we want to, move forward. But at the end of the day, you always have to know, how did I really want this to work? And then figure out what are the pieces that will make that happen.
Yeah, because let's face it, and I don't say this out of a scarcity mode, but I look at it and sometimes I feel like I'm being subscription to death, right? And so there's all these different
Absolutely.
things out there, and there does come a point in time. Now, I'm not recommending to those of you listening that if you're in business for yourself, that you go figure that out, have somebody help you figure out what you're subscribing to. And if you're paying for something that you already get somewhere else, like have somebody else do that, but figure that piece of it out, because then you can also look at your system and say, is the software, are the programs that I have that are supporting the system still working? Because I heard you say earlier, sometimes in the moment it worked for what it needed it to be, but now you've evolved and you've leveled up as a business. And so that might need to change.
Yep, absolutely. And really a
And-
systems audit is like, I think I do it myself annually. I just literally run through and see what are all the things I'm using and why. And I have a little form and I, do the thing. And it
I
helps
love
me.
you. And those of you that are listening, this is why Tammy's so awesome, because I love that you nerd out on that kind of stuff.
I do.
Because I nerd out on like, let's work with clients, let's sell, like I'm all about connection and doing that piece of it, where I'm like, somebody else can do the detail. The guy I'm dating
Yes.
always laughs at me because he's the detail guy. I'm like, I want nothing to do with details. The more of my painting, the more I can flow in something, the better off I am,
Yeah.
which isn't how I've always been.
Good for
But-
you for finding it though. That
Yeah,
is amazing.
thank you.
Because people spend their whole lives looking for that flow, that they know that they're in the right place doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So it's amazing when you
Yeah.
find it.
And Tammy, it sounds like you help other people do that too, right? Because within your business, there are pieces that you do that take you out of flow.
Yes.
That if you really
absolutely.
look at it, sometimes we get into a scarcity mode, right? Like I talk about with my accountants doing my bookkeeping. Yeah, could I do my own bookkeeping? Yes, but I know that, and if you're listening, my bookkeepers, like I know I can make 5 times more in the 3 or 4 hours that it would take me to do all of that work than what I'm paying them. But we sometimes get into a rut as business owners, thinking that it's got to stay the way it is, or we're going to lose money, when in fact it frees you up, which is what I heard you say at the very beginning, right? Like that it frees you up when you have these systems. So Tammy, if somebody wanted to work with you, find out more about what they might be able to do to have you help them in their business, where should we send them?
I think the best place to go would be to check out my website, which is TammyOlson.com. Oh, excuse me. It's not. It's TammyOlsonConsulting.com.
There you go. There you go.
There
That's
it is.
right. That's right. So Tammy Olson, and for those of you listening, it's TammyOls as in Sam, ON consulting.com, and we'll have it down in the show notes as well. Tammy, thank you so much for being with us today. And I appreciate some of the hacks and the ideas and thoughts that you've put into my head, and I'm sure into our listeners' heads as well. So thank you so much. And with that, it's a wrap. Everyone have a great day. And if you would like to learn more about how you can work with me, feel free to go out to www.leadyourlituplife.com and schedule a free consult with me. I'd love to have a chat with you. So with that, we're done for the week. Everyone have a great one. Bye.
Find your own kind of happy. See the colors of